Women. What's the most romantic gesture that turned out to be a red flag? The moment I realized I'd been living a lie was last Thursday. I was charging my laptop when a notification popped up. Location history updated. I hadn't installed any tracking apps, but there it was. A map of every place I'd been for the past 6 months, down to the minute. It started 2 years ago. I met Liam at a coffee shop. He was witty, disarmingly attentive, and unlike anyone I'd dated. Within weeks, he'd memorized my latte order, my favorite books, even the name of my childhood cat. He'd show up at my office with lunch just because, leave handwritten notes on my windshield, and plan elaborate picnics with rose petals and string lights. My friends swooned. "He's obsessed with you," they'd say, laughing. I mistook intensity for devotion. The first year felt like a rom-com montage. He'd surprise me with weekend getaways, coordinate matching outfits for dates, and post endless tributes to my queen on social media. But slowly, cracks appeared. Liam hated being apart. If I didn't answer his texts within 10 minutes, he'd panic. Once, during a girls' trip, he called me 27 times in 2 hours. When I finally picked up, he sobbed, "I thought you were dead." I felt guilty. He just cares so much, and cut my trip short. He began insisting on driving me everywhere. "Your car's unreliable, babe," he'd say, despite it being perfectly fine. When I mentioned hanging out with my brother, he'd pout. Why waste time with him when we could be together? Last Christmas, he planned a romantic cabin retreat. But upon arrival, there was no Wi-Fi or cell service. "It's about us," he said, kissing my forehead. By day 3, I was desperate to check on my mom, who'd been sick. He hid the car keys. "You're overreacting. Let's just enjoy this." When we returned, I found missed calls from the hospital. Mom had pneumonia. Liam shrugged. "She's fine. You're here now." After the cabin, I started noticing odd things. My phone battery drained faster. Apps I didn't recognize appeared. I brushed it off until that Thursday. The tracking app wasn't just logging locations. It had screenshots of my texts, my search history, even recordings of phone calls. My hands shook as I scrolled. He'd been monitoring me for months. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. "I did it to protect you. You're naive. Someone has to look out for you." His voice softened. "I just can't lose you." But then he smirked. "Besides, you'd never leave. You need me." That night, I packed a bag while he slept. I left the ring he'd given me, a promise he'd slipped onto my finger during a movie, on the kitchen counter. Now, I'm staying with my brother. Liam's blown up my email, sent flowers to my job, and even showed up at my gym. Yesterday, I got a text from an unknown number. "You'll never find anyone who loves you like I do." People ask, how'd you miss the signs? Because love bombing feels like validation. Because gaslighting sounds like concern. Because every time I questioned him, he'd write me a poem or plan a sunset cruise, and I'd think, see? He's perfect. He wasn't. And neither was the fairy tale.